Hey everyone, welcome back to Cincinnati Zoo Tales. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Mark. Jen, I'm really excited about today's episode. We're talking about the botanical side of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, something that I always like to learn more about because it's not my expertise. So we're being joined by the man for the job today, our resident plant guru here, Director of Horticulture, Steve Foltz. Steve, thanks for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you both. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I feel like you guys do all sorts of things, but I'm learning, and what we'll learn more about in this episode are the things that you wouldn't think that your team is doing, or no one would like just somehow know that these are things you're doing. So they're very cool projects, but just to start us off, like give us a little update on what's going around inside the zoo with horticulture.
Well, every year we have a massive annual plant display. And, you know, it's, of course, it's that time of the year where you're planting annuals that, you know, the plants come back or die after they're done blooming in the fall. So we do 60,000 annuals a year, probably close to 700 plus varieties.
Oh my gosh.
And all of these are donated by companies all around the world. So they donate their latest, newest varieties for us to try out in the Midwest. And it's a massive, we're one of the largest annual trial displays in the country. And not a lot of people know that. They just know when they come to the zoo, it's really pretty.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But actually, there's a lot of in-depth studies that go on with that. And so why this is fresh in my mind, we've spent the last 3 weeks doing nothing but planting annuals here. And it is a massive project, but the idea is, you know, people spend, you know, a lot of money at the garden stores, and you know, we want to make sure that if they want to buy something, it's something that does really well around here, and that's our job. And so we come up with what we call the zoo's best annuals for the landscape, and you know, we've been doing this since 2002. And like you said, all the breeders from around the world really are in the program. And then all the people that produce all these annuals are part of this program, which that's people all the way from Michigan to New York to West Virginia to, you know, Florida. And then that in turn, information is given to all the local growers, like the Natorps and the Diefenbachers and the, you know, all the stores that you would shop and visit. And it's all one big you know, trialing effort. And the goal is to see what are the best, showiest, most beautiful annuals that are easiest to grow, you know, but also, of course, now that the zoo's involved, we're the ones that started it, but it's, okay, what kind of pollinators are coming? And that's something that you don't think about pollinators and annuals, but there's a lot of pollinators that hit annuals. And some of the annuals, they'll start blooming in May, and they won't quit till October. And so you get hummingbirds and bees and bumblebees and sphinx moths and all kinds of neat things coming. And, you know, so part of our job is, A, does it do well around here? B, is it showy and fun? And C, how does it help wildlife? And how does it help the local urban ecosystem? And, you know, so that's one of the big things that we do with our annual trials program.
That sounds amazing. So are there like certain parameters, or how, like that's so many plants? You said
Yeah,
60,000. And let's just go with 700 different species that you're like looking at. How do you even keep track? Do they have charts and you like score them, or how does that, and are you doing that weekly, or do you do it once a month or at the very end?
Usually we do it 3 times.
Okay.
It's like July, August, and September. And it's for the beauty and the ease of growing, it's pretty easy. You know, it's like a 1 through 5.
Okay.
And if it doesn't hit a 4 or a 5, it gets less looked at.
Okay.
It's out. Didn't meet the cut.
It may not have met the cut unless it gets better, which is usually rare. And not to say it's not a great, you know, annual. It's just when, you know, our level, we want to see the very best of the best. And so, you know, we usually do that with volunteers. We have a tremendous volunteer group here at the zoo. Some of the volunteers have been around over 30 years.
Wow.
So, some of our staff have only been here 3 to 5 years, and they're just kind of catching on. These volunteers are like, come on, man, catch up.
Yeah.
But they help us out with everything from the planting, the weeding, the mulching, but also the evaluations, and just they're very, very talented people, and we couldn't do what we do without our volunteer group, and for that matter, corporate groups help a lot too, getting things ready. Digging out all the bulbs, the tulip bulbs, which is a whole nother process.
Yeah.
And just, mulching, things that, there's just so many layers to what we do. Every little support we can get helps the whole entire zoo, which in turn helps the whole entire city and the community. And so everyone kind of knows that's what it's all about. But to your point, yeah, we do have a master list, and we aim for the best. And again, that narrows down the list quite a bit. And what's different about our trials than say a university trial is university just gets the 2025 list. Well, that's great. But what about all the ones in the past 20 years that have done really well? With 1.8 million people coming to the zoo, we want people to see what won in 2002 and 2003 and 2000. So with that, we amassed this beautiful landscape with all these great, annuals that, the normal person just enjoys. And the plant geeks are like, oh my gosh, they have this.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. What would you say? I feel like a question that we get walking around the zoo a lot. What would you say to a guest who comes up and asks, "It's Cincinnati Zoo Botanical Garden. Where's the botanical garden? Where is it supposed to be? What am I looking for?" What would you say to a guest that asks that?
That's a great question. We're unique at the Cincinnati Botanical Garden and Zoo, in that the botanical garden is blended right in with everything. And some zoos you go to, it's well, here's the zoo. Well, the garden, you have to go across the river, and there's where the garden is. So people go to those places and they assume that there's a garden area, when actually in 1873, a bit of history, Adolf Strauch, who is the landscape designer who did a lot of our local parks, but before that he did Spring Grove Cemetery and Arboretum. And if you haven't been to Spring Grove, it's a masterpiece. So this guy was a ultimate legend in landscape design and architecture and horticulture. And he, in 1873, when the zoo started, said, we want the zoo to be more of an experimental garden. We want to try all these different plants from around the world to see, what works. And with that, you'll get a lot of interest and a lot of people want to come. That was 1873.
What a good thought.
He's ahead of his
my
time.
gosh, yeah.
Way ahead of his time.
I cannot imagine.
And so when we started, doing a lot of trialing, that's about, we always keep that in mind. This is great information that the community needs, but also, if you plant it, people will come, and the insects will come, and the birds will come, and it's exactly what happens. So, lot of fun there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, at least most people I talk to, some of their highlights of the zoo is the landscape work, and the fact that it is just seamlessly, you walk through an exhibit and it's so atmospheric, you don't even think about it, but you're taking in the plants and the flowers and everything else as you're walking through. One big question I had for you: anyone who's been to the zoo recently has seen our beautiful new habitat, Elephant Trek area. It's gorgeous, it's lush with plant life. What kind of role do you play when we do open a new habitat like that? What is horticulture team's role in opening something like that? Because it's a big undertaking.
Well, you have another good question. So we're unique in horticulture, obviously, with all the annual trial, all the other things that we do, but in particular, we are one of the few zoos in the world that actually starts from design to actual plans to actual physically working the soil protecting the trees and actually putting in the landscape, even growing plants for the landscape that we're about to do. I don't think there's any other zoo in the world that does that. And so right off the bat, we work with, when anyone says, hey, I got an idea, let's put an elephant in a parking lot. And it's like, okay, what's that mean? So right away we get with the architects and the civil engineers and the planners, and we go, okay, let's walk this space. What do we like about this space? And for the elephant track, it was the tree line on the outside. And yeah, you know what, it'd be easy to rip out everything and then build how you want it. But the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, they choose a different route. They say, what do we want to keep? What looks good? What can we work around? And so when you look at that view, as it was a parking lot, you're like, man, those trees in the surrounding area, it's like borrowed scenery. It's like a Japanese, garden thing. And that's exactly what we do. So we rate the trees, and we actually go through tree by tree and give it an A, B, or C. If it's an A, our department's going to chain ourselves to that tree, and it's not going anywhere. If it's a B, we're close. We're still going to argue. If it's a C, don't waste your time working around it. Let's take that one out. Or, hey, we'd like to keep it, but maybe we can. If it becomes too cost prohibitive to keep it, we'll let that one go.
Which is so important to our mission that, we're trying to take care of wildlife and plants and all of these things, and you don't want to take down trees just because it's the easier way to go. They're so important. But also, I'm sure you have the tricky part of any trees that weren't originally in a habitat that have just been around the zoo that could potentially be toxic for animals too. Like, is that something you guys score? Is that part of the A, B, and C?
Yeah.
Or I know we've had,
There's always that, how toxic is it? Can we fence that off? And,
Yeah.
So that all is part of it. And,
That's tough with our landlocked zoo. Like, you want to keep us all
it
alone.
is. And, but at the end of the day, and again, we have all these outside contractors come in to help build the new habitats. And, they always come in like, are you kidding me? Do we have to work around that tree the whole time? And, we've been here a long time, so we know the story. And at the end of the project, when it opens up, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't understand what you all were talking about, but now I get it.
Oh, that's
now
awesome.
I know why we left the trees and why we worked around them, and because it is a different feel. It just lends age to the project. And for instance, the elm that we have the Asian waterfall garden, that's about a 300-year-old elm. Wow. And you have to give a little respect to trees that have been here for more generations than us. And so I think the zoo's done a phenomenal job working with that. And we have just a great team here at the zoo all around, and that's what it shows, and that's why it shows.
How many people do you have on the horticulture team?
There's about 15 full-time, and that includes, we have 2 out at our Boyer property that maintain the nurseries and the farm out there. We have irrigation. We have an arborist that makes sure that our trees are in good shape. Volunteer coordinator. We have project team manager, and so you think 15, it's a lot, but then you look at all the different, some gardens have like 300 full-time people, and we're like 15. Yeah, that's right.
Right. For anyone listening, like, maybe 15 sounds like a lot, but thinking of what we see you guys do, like I always say, I think you're the hardest working department. Like, I can't imagine the things you do, mostly just because of like the discomfort. Like, you're out in the heat, or, on your knees digging things, or pulling weeds, or having branches flung in your face, or all different sorts of things that, you get scrapes all over. I'm just like, this is not my favorite thing to do. But not only are you planting all of these annuals and planting, hundreds of thousands of tulip bulbs, and then changing things, but you're maintaining the habitat, like the areas around the zoo that need trimmed back or out of pathways. You're mulching, you're planting, you're planning, like so many things, so much more than what I think 15. Well, you said you have tons of
Right.
volunteers that help, but what 15 people could do.
And a lot of, we also have interns and seasonals, interns, they're all the same to me. They're all people who are passionate about horticulture and they want to learn their plants. Some of them are in college and, we recently have one from the zoo school who is going to be a superstar. But there's a lot of people that are just passionate about what we do, and that helps. But with the rainy spring we've had,
Oh my gosh,
and all the annuals we've been trying to get in, we might be a little overgrowing right now. To limp things up, clean things up. So if you ask what we're about to do in the next couple of weeks, that's
okay.
going to be it. So.
So on top of all of that, you guys are doing things out in the community, and truly I think the Zoo and Botanical Garden here is amazing for the city and the community, and we're also really lucky in the sense that the community finds value in the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, and you guys are bringing it outside of the zoo to help communities, and I've heard of several projects recently, so I don't know which one you want to start with, but will you tell us about some of these community projects that you guys have been working on for years or just recently this year?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've been here a long time, and a long time ago, it was almost like we don't want anyone to see the zoo until they get in the gates. It's like the surprise, the wow moment, and that kind of went away. And when Thane took over, we started working a little bit with communities around town. Sometimes just quietly, cleaning up a vacant lot and putting in a few trees, and it kind of snowballed from that. To be honest with you, it was knowing that we clean up an area and put a few trees in. The impact that simple little act made in that community was amazing. And it was like we could feel it, and when you talk to the community leaders, they're like, yeah, the zoo said they were going to do this, and they did it, and they're almost like surprised, and you're like, oh well, yeah, that's what we were going to do. So I think in the last probably 20 years we've started to build that reputation, and about 10 years ago we started working with the Cincinnati Reds Community Fund, and that kind of took all these little tiny projects and said, hey, let's put it to work with one big community effort. And so between P&G, Cincinnati Reds Community Fund, who really leads the effort, and the zoo, basically those are the three main characters that started doing a little bit more than just help with a ball field in the community. It went from ball fields to rec centers to, now we're doing school projects. And again, there are a lot of organizations that are helping out with the Reds Community Fund as well. But the community makeover is like a one-day, 500 volunteer
Wow.
attack on a community. Now, granted, it takes a year to plan for all that, but it's really focused, and the Reds are building synthetic turf infields a lot. Why? Well, if it rains like it is today and tomorrow, or next week it's going to be rainy, and Saturday morning the kids are going to wake up and our game's canceled. Well, now that it's not canceled because it's astroturf.
Wow,
So right
that.
away it really helps that. And so horticulture started doing work with some trees. It's always putting good long-term 100-year trees into a community with this project. And then we started building what we call urban learning gardens. And the best example is Rockdale Academy. And that happened kind of during COVID, which it was kind of a blessing because we had all these plants that we grew for the zoo, and we didn't have volunteers. We didn't have a lot of the staff that we usually have. So we were able to put close to 8,000 to 10,000 perennials, 1,300 3-gallon shrubs, and 166 trees into this 2-acre site, in which the teachers wanted a learning garden put in, which I think they were thinking the size of a 10 by 12 room. And we're like, I think we could do a little better than this. And so we ended up doing all the different things you could do in a school garden. You know, amphitheaters, sensory gardens. We built Quonset huts in a greenhouse for the kids to learn how to grow. And those Quonsets and greenhouses are currently growing things for the next community project. So when we do this year, we're doing Walnut Hills and Frederick Douglass and Dr. Odell Owen's school. Those are two of the learning gardens that we're going to be involved with. And these gardens are meant to, you know, for the teachers to take the kids out and just teach them about science, like live science. You know, in the fall we'll see monarchs in the garden because we have Asclepias and host plants. And you know, we did last year, we did Bond Hill, we did Xavier Jesuit Academy, and we were able to go back this year. And you know, we walked out the door, the kids are, you know, ready to take us on a tour, and here's a spice bush swallowtail just right in front of us. And it's like, well, that was planned because there's spice bush on the outside that we planted. And you know, so you build it the right way, and then things will come. And the kids are proud of, you know, they had to do reports on, you know, one did a report on sassafras and the other did a report on the you know, the lamb's ears. And you know, so the teachers are using that to teach the kids. But the thing that comes out of that is sometimes when kids act up a little bit, you take them into a little 8 by 8 room and, you know, try to calm them down. Well, now they're walking them out into the garden, and you know,
so much
pressure
better,
goes
yes,
down.
yeah.
And so we found that the teachers and the principals are starting to use that in a great way. And so, you know, again, not only we're getting shade trees in for long-term success, you know, we're getting layers of host plants for pollinators, but then also the pollinator gardens. But in general, just beautiful areas for kids to enjoy and learn. It's like another room on the outside. And it's been super successful. And these are the things that you just, you know it's going to happen. And then you build a few and it does happen. And you're like, this was worth it.
That sounds amazing. Like as a kid, I remember in elementary school, I was lucky enough that my school had like a nature center behind it, and that was my favorite thing in the whole world to do at school was when we got to go on, like, they weren't field trips, we could literally, it's like walking to the playground for recess, but a little bit further into the woods, and they had like a pond, and you know, we might see cattails or a frog or, you know, nothing super cool, or I shouldn't say that, but you know, it was nothing like crazy. It was just, you might see some bugs or some squirrels, but getting to go out in the woods was like my favorite thing. And when you have communities that are, you know, in the city, they aren't going to have these opportunities, but thanks to you guys, now they can go out and see a butterfly when they walk outside their door, and all of these plants, and like as close to this nature center as possible, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. In fact, the latest one that we worked on, there's the Youth Juvenile Detention Center, which is on, I guess, Auburn Avenue. And that was one that came out of one of our projects that we did 2 or 3 years ago. The folks there said, what's going on over there? And here we were building an urban learning garden in Madisonville. And they said, well, man, this would be really neat. So they asked us to come over and look at it. And
I was wondering how you decided where to do your projects at, but it's kind of like word of mouth a little bit? Or?
They're all brought to us.
Okay.
We don't go out looking for anything. And you know, if it matches up, if we feel like it's a good project, we'll support it. And but this one, it's like 4 giant walls, and you know, it's very difficult. You know, the detention centers is a tough place to be, and so we built a lot of raised beds on the outside where they're outdoor basketball courts. They had 2 sets of them. One set, they said, you know what, we want to do something for a learning garden here. And so just simple, you know, 12-inch raised beds all around the outside and a couple in the center. And we put in, you know, vines that are not thick, but, you know, small vines that could crawl up the wall, because, you know, hate to say it, but look like a jail.
Yeah.
Well, how can we make this space not look like a jail? And so we use some vines to crawl up, 3 types of vines, 4 types of vines. And then we put in, all 4 seasons, some evergreens, we did tulips in the fall for them. And then when the tulips were done, we put in, we just got done yesterday. So we put in peppers and tomato plants, and they actually grew. They had a hydroponic system, and they pulled their plants out of the hydroponic system to plant in the garden, which was really cool. So the kids grew them, and now they're so it's almost a reward to go out and work in the garden for the kids. And but what we're finding is, the people that work there, we put in a lot of cut flowers. We put in lots of different annuals and perennials, and big dahlias. And it's like, you guys can cut these and put them on your desk, at the entrance, and everyone's super excited about it now. It's not just for the kids, and it's for the people that work there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you find about gardens is, you might think it's for one reason, but honestly, it fills a lot of voids. And so that's how that project came about. There's a little more to it than that, but simply put, it was space that they weren't using that now is active and hopefully pollinator friendly. And
I was just going to say, it's going to help all sorts of different lives, right? So the kids that are living there, the people that work there, I'm sure that's not an easy job to stay, positive and upbeat. And then it's helping, pollinators and local wildlife as well.
Yeah.
Like it can even feed the kids. Like I don't know. It's just making such a huge impact, and you would never think of like planting some plants could really affect different lives that much.
What a simple thing to do, again, that will do that.
But that's one of the special things about gardens is they really do bring people together from different walks of life and different backgrounds, and you can kind of unite for this common cause to grow a flower or grow some plants. It's always exciting to see the fruits of your labor, and especially I think of a place like, I had never heard of this juvenile detentions partnership that we had. So like I thought that was such a cool story, because this is a place like you said, you see him and depicted on TV and in shows and everything, and it's like it's really drab. It's kind of designed to be a depressing place, right? And then you guys are able to kind of bring life to the area and bring hope. Like it's really special.
Yeah, it was one of the most exciting things I think we've done in the last year.
That's awesome. Have you heard any like specific stories you can think of off the top of your head that the kids, like success that you can tell the kids love it, or any?
Well, I can tell you this: when we walk in, we don't see much of the kids, but we see a lot of the folks that work there, and the zoo's here, and their faces light up because they appreciate what we do, and mind you, it's a lot of work, and it took us a day to prep and probably a day to plant, and it was it's a lot of work, but I want to say we used close to 1,000 plants in there.
Wow. Will you guys maintain that at all?
No, they actually have volunteers that are going to maintain.
Okay.
And we'll draw out. We have an AmeriCorps member that does a map and a maintenance plan.
Oh, awesome.
And that helps the people who are, because we're using some pretty unusual plants, and it's not your typical, garden, but it just helps them understand what they need to do and how they need to do it. And they have 2 volunteers that are going to kind of manage it and work with the kids on a learning portion of this. So, hopefully teach them some science and actually teach them schooling, because this is what it's all about. Mm-hmm. There's soils, there's insects, there's diseases, there's, the water, the fertilization, the just maintenance tips, and that we have so much in the urban landscape. You think about how urban we've become, and urban agriculture is a big thing, but when you say urban agriculture, people think you're growing vegetables everywhere. That's it. But maintaining the urban landscape is a huge job opportunity for people, and I think that's a skill that needs to be taught more, because there's so much urban, there's so much maintenance, because once you tear out the native trees, the native soil, build a building, a parking lot, and you're always going to have to maintain the landscape.
Yeah.
Those jobs are going to become more and more important, and especially if we do it better than what we're doing now.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing amazing work, and we're so proud of your team. The zoo always looks incredible, and
For
it's
sure.
definitely a highlight of our guests that come here. I know it's not just the animals, it's how beautiful it is. Are there any other projects or anything you want to touch on before we wrap up that you haven't mentioned, or anything we haven't talked about?
Project-wise, another thing that we do is we do a lot of, we have a Boyer Farm. And Boyer Farm, for us, started out as a place where we could do our native plant program a little better. Because here we build raised beds and grow very rare, native plants, and next thing you know, a building comes in, or a parking lot, or, the zoo is constantly changing. So here was a space where Brian Jorg's our horticulturist out there, and he's like, every time I get something going, it disappears. So we kind of moved him and the operation out to Boyer. We started with one little Quonset hut, and there was another company out there doing something, green bean delivery, and that didn't work out, but they had a Quonset hut. And next thing you know, we took a couple more Quonset huts, and next thing you know, we're growing all the perennials and shrubs for the zoo, and we're having plant sales of native plants that are not your typical ones that you get at the local garden center. These are things that, so basically it's out in Mason, Montgomery, and there are so many developments going on out there, and we're losing diversity of native plants. So what better way to help the local conservation out there to put new varieties of native plants that belong there and get them for sale out to the houses and communities that are out there being built. So again, you don't think of, it was farmland, and now it's, going into more housing. Almost in the future, it'll be the urban center.
Yeah.
And if we can start ahead now by getting lots of diversity, it's all about plant diversity, because plant diversity brings in the insect diversity and the animal diversity, and it builds resilience, because the monocultures just aren't good, and so this is one way that we can do local conservation very easily. And again, when you talk about elephant track, we put like 75 big leaf magnolias that we personally grew from a local source at Spring Grove Cemetery, one of the trees that we collect seed from, and it's well known because it flowers so much better and it's so much stronger. So that type of program where we collect seed off of trees that are doing exceptionally well and have stood the test of time in Cincinnati, that's part of our urban tree program. And we have so many little name programs, but ultimately it is about being able to support a local urban habitats in a way that's different than your typical landscape. So that's one of our overarching goals.
Yeah, it's pretty special. I know every now and then the Boyer does a couple events through the year where it is open to the public, and it's a really cool place to see not only the nursery and the garden areas, but the restored wetland habitat too out there is really special. I think you guys, not only on zoo grounds, but off zoo grounds as well, with all the projects in the community, you're definitely hitting that goal of spreading plant diversity, because you see it everywhere that you guys work.
Yes,
you leave a trail of it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh my gosh, I love Boyer. I love that property so much. I wish it were closer.
There's so many things that come out of Boyer. In fact, we just saw a fairly rare insect out there. It's a sawfly that's eating our button bush that we're growing. And even though it sounds like, oh, that's terrible, I don't think we've ever seen the sawfly before in the area.
But it's native, and
it's a native sawfly.
Wow.
It's like, well, do you spray it? No, we don't spray out there.
Yeah.
That's whole part of it, because
Yeah.
the sawfly brings in the bird. Some bird's going to eat the sawfly,
Yeah.
and some little bird's going to benefit from that. And
I also think it's amazing that you guys would, as horticulturists, like as animal people, I could name like 5 plants, right? But you guys, it sounds like you guys know your birds and your insects, and you
Yeah.
know like thousands of plants. And I think it's amazing that somebody recognized what a sawfly was. I would have seen it and been like, that's normal, right?
it was so pretty.
Really? I'm going to have to look it up after this.
Actually, we saw the fact that half the plant was gone.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was
What's
like,
happening
that's
here?
not normal. But again, it goes back to that diversity and, just all the different things that we do. It's just, Boyer's a very special. We actually even grow very endangered species out there, like the Kentucky clover. I mean, it's not something a homeowner's going, oh, I want Kentucky clover. It's federally endangered. You probably can't even have it anyway. But we're supplying. We collected the plants. They sent them to Crew. Crew tissue cultured the plants and then moved them out to Boyer, where our crew out there has grown thousands of little plants that will go back into the wild to help that population stabilize. And
So incredible.
there's just so many stories.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
That's awesome. It's endless.
Yes. Well, clearly you and your team are doing amazing things for the world. But my final question for you is, what can I do? What can somebody listening do to be a better steward of the earth, to, just help out their local wildlife? Or is there anything you do at home that you're proud of that you think others could easily do as well that you want to share?
I think the number one thing is, like we've said all along, if you plant it, they will come. So, we do a lot of work on educating about proper soil, techniques and planting and the right plants, the best plants, and a diversity of plants. But just taking action by going out and putting some, plants out in your garden. Whether you have a pot on your deck at the condo, you can build a little annual, pollinator garden in your container. Or just take a 10 by 10 area, or we like just start with areas in your yard that you actually live, your patio, your decks, just take little pieces here and little piece there, and pretty soon, 10 years later, you'll find that, oh my gosh, I've built an urban habitat, so. I think starting by doing those plantings is a great way to go.
That's good advice, because it's really expensive to plant plants sometimes, at least the ones that are already, big enough for you to feel they're established, and it takes a lot of time, and I don't know anything about soil. I know very little about plants, and I never really know what to plant, but I'll go and spend, a couple $100 a summer and just plant something, and then hope I got the right ones that survive the winter. But it does feel like a really big job. Like if you wanted to do your whole yard at once, that feels like too much to handle, especially if you don't have tons of money. But if there was so starting small is a great idea, and just doing a little bit each year is amazing. If there was is there one plant that you think is great for local wildlife and easy? Does one come to your head that you think everyone could just go buy, one perennial that you would recommend?
Wow, that is probably the best question I've had all
That's
day.
a golden question right there. I would say.
You finally stumped me. I am now silent. No, I think you start with things that make you happy. And, for me, say instead of doing, I plant my vegetable garden, $100 for a vegetable garden, all my plants, and I get like $25 worth of fruit, and vegetables from it. Not a great financial move, but it makes me happy.
Right,
Sure.
yeah.
And I would say, like on our homeowner landscape series, the first thing I say is start with specimens. Start with really cool plants that you really love that are going to be around. And one of my favorites. It's not great for the native, movement, but Japanese maples are so cool. Weeping ones that turn this brilliant orange in the fall. That makes me happy. And I've got bottle brush buckeye. It's one shrub that grows in wet and shade and sun. The deer
That's
won't
what I
eat
need.
it,
Yeah, you
and-
need to give me one of those.
and that's one of my favorites. And pretty soon you start adding your little favorites, and it for the shade. The deer will eat hosta, but they won't eat this little plant called epimedium or variegated Solomon seal. And once you find out that if you use the right plants, you'll have success. And that way you're not planting the same plant in the same place all the time. So you can branch out a little bit and, add a little bit here, a little bit there. And but one plant, maybe white oak.
Okay.
Put in a white oak tree.
But that takes forever, right?
Yeah, but
Yes.
that's, that's
I mean,
part
I'm
of
not
the
saying you
fun.
shouldn't do it, but like that is, you won't get the instant gratification,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
maybe.
hear you.
Or like unless you have advice of where to buy trees. I can never find like a tree that is, I can actually carry it and like take it home.
Like more mature.
Yes,
Yeah.
and afford it. Like, do you
It is tough.
do you have suggestions? Is there any?
I would say start with your local, or local garden
Okay.
centers, and and again, the zoo, we have our sales in the spring and in the fall, and but it, I think it does start local. I'm not a fan of buying anything online when it comes to plant material. Unless you're buying it online at a local place, but I like to go visit the local gardens. And I mean, we have probably 300 varieties of perennials and shrubs out at our farm now that will become available. And some of them are great, some of them are maybe not so great. That's why we're trialing them out. But we have a plant for pollinators, the zoo's best plants for pollinators. That brochure would be a really good place to start.
Perfect. Yeah, I need to check that out. I think I don't know how you say this. Zinnias or zinnias?
Zinnias.
Zinnias is how I say it. Make me so happy, and they're so easy.
There you go,
Right?
that's where to
but,
start.
But they're annuals, right? I mean, I have to
But the
replant
bees
them.
love them.
Yes, they're amazing.
And the wildlife, yeah.
And then I think I don't know how you feel about butterfly bush, but those seem easy to grow. At least I've been able to keep mine alive, and it gets big quickly.
Yeah, that's one of those hot button topics.
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, butterfly bush can, out in certain areas, get a little bit out of hand and invasive.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
good to know.
But-
See,
Interesting.
But in the urban area, in a pot or one planted on your patio, is not going to be a problem.
Okay.
But
I
if
just have
you
one.
if you went and did hey, I've got a hillside, I want to put 20 different varieties, that's probably not the right move.
Okay.
But boy, you want to see a butterfly? You put a butterfly bush in, and you can buy them in 1 gallon, like 6-inch size pots, and stick them in a container and use that for almost like a summer pot in the sun, and then just discard it.
yeah.
And because they're inexpensive, and that way there won't be any problem with that. But I do love butterfly bush because of the butterflies that come on it.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
pretty hard. Pugster blue is a really fragrant, nice one. But
Yeah, it's that. There's just so much to know. I
I
never
know.
know. Like plants, I am
It's
so
endless.
bad at
It's
plants.
endless.
I can keep outdoor plants alive, just well enough. Indoor plants, that's a whole nother story. I can't.
I can't either.
That's what stumped him. Indoor plants.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for everything you shared with us and your team is doing for the community. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have you on again this is your second episode. For anyone who missed the first one, that was on the tulips specifically. I think you were one of our first episodes.
Yeah, it's a
so.
long time.
Long
Years
time
ago.
ago.
At this point, yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure we'll have you back again. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This is great.
Definitely. Thanks to you and your team. To all you listeners out there, just go plant a plant that makes you happy.
I love that
today.
advice.
Yes.
Have a good day.
Awesome. Take care.